I want you to think for a second about what immediately comes to your mind when you hear the phrase, freedom of speech.
Oh, that's a loaded one.
Right. It really is. Because
Yeah.
if you're like most people navigating the world today, you're probably instantly fall into one of two very entrenched camps.
Yeah, completely polarized.
Exactly. So in the first camp, you have people who believe free speech is this like absolute untouchable right, this idea that you should be able to say whatever you want, wherever you want, at any time with zero consequences.
The utopian view.
Right. And then over in the second camp, you have people who look at the messiness of the real world, the algorithms, the politics, the sheer hypocrisy of it all. And they just dismiss the concept entirely.
They just throw their hands up.
Exactly. They throw their hands up because the system is so flawed, it feels like a joke to them.
Which, I mean, that is such a modern binary way of looking at the world. You either have absolute utopian freedom or it's completely meaningless.
Yeah.
But if we look at the research we're getting into today, we're doing a deep dive into an essay by Mark Legend Gangmei, which is all about China and the limits of freedom. Well, both of those extreme views completely miss the underlying mechanics of what freedom actually is.
Right.
And more importantly, how it functions in reality.
So to really understand those mechanics, we kind of have to pull way back, right? Because our mission today is to shatter those binary misconceptions. We want to explore how freedom is actually measured on a global scale and objectively look at how China fits into this.
Yeah, because we tend to think of free speech as like an internet era problem.
Oh, totally. We think about social media platforms, deplatforming, algorithm.
Modern political regimes. But the struggle over who gets to speak, who gets to think, and who gets to believe, I mean, that is basically humanity's oldest political battle.
It goes way back.
Way back. Kings, emperors, religious authorities, tribal leaders, they have always tried to monopolize the narrative.
Whoever's in charge wants to control what's being said.
Exactly. The default human condition for, well, thousands of years was top-down control. The ruler literally owned the truth.
Wow.
So the idea that an individual inherently possesses a right to speak their mind, regardless of what the ruler thinks, is actually incredibly new.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things.
It wasn't until, really, the ashes of World War II when the global community saw exactly what unchecked absolute state control could lead to that we saw a major paradigm shift.
Right, the collective trauma of the war.
Yes. And that trauma resulted in the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was a radical intervention in human history.
Because it formally recognized free expression as a universal baseline.
Exactly. Directly contradicting millennia of authoritarian dominance.
Okay, let's unpack this because, I mean, if rulers have essentially monopolized speech since the dawn of civilization, isn't this modern concept of free speech we've had since 1948, isn't it just a temporary anomaly?
That's a fascinating way to look at it.
Right. I mean, if control is the historical default setting for humanity, aren't we just living in a weird, brief window of time where we, pretend everyone gets a voice?
Well, that's a highly cynical view, but it's exactly the assumption this essay wants to challenge.
Okay.
To understand whether free speech is just a historical blip, we first have to completely discard that utopian version of it we talked about earlier.
The idea that you can say whatever you want whenever you want.
Right. Because that version, the one with zero friction, it doesn't exist anywhere. Not historically and not today.
Nowhere at all.
Nowhere. And what's fascinating here is a crucial fact from the source that most people completely overlook when debating this topic. There is no absolute freedom of speech anywhere on Earth.
Well, I mean, that makes sense. Because every society requires some level of baseline order just to function.
Precisely.
You can't have a functioning society if people are allowed to, incite riots or deliberately destroy someone's life with fabricated lies.
Exactly. Every single society imposes restrictions. Even the most robust democracies have laws against defamation and libel.
Right.
They have restrictions to prevent the incitement of imminent violence. They enforce rules protecting national security, classified information. Limits always exist.
Because individual rights are constantly crashing into competing societal interests.
Yes, exactly. But here is the critical pivot the author makes. The absence of absolute freedom does not make freedom meaningless.
Okay, wait. I actually have an analogy for this that might help you listening at home visualize this.
Oh, let's hear it.
Think of freedom of speech like a speed limit on a highway.
Okay.
Just because you can't legally drive 150 miles per hour and, endanger everyone else on the road, that doesn't mean you don't have the freedom to drive your car.
Right.
You can still travel. You can still choose your destination. You can still operate your vehicle. The existence of a speed limit doesn't erase the freedom of mobility itself. It just provides a framework so society can function safely.
I love that. That's a great way to visualize it. The limit doesn't negate the freedom.
Right.
In fact, because freedom is never absolute, and because it exists in this fragile, constant state of balancing competing interests, it requires active, perpetual defense.
It's never just set it and forget it.
No, it has to be continually negotiated. And the author argues that this nuance is where people fundamentally misunderstand global freedom rankings.
Like the indexes published by Freedom House.
Exactly.
Because those rankings get weaponized in geopolitical debates all the time.
Yeah.
Like people look at a country like Norway ranking near the absolute top of the index, and they mistakenly assume, oh, Norwegians can say literally anything they want.
Which is fundamentally misreading the data. A top ranking doesn't mean Norway has achieved utopian perfection or absolute free speech.
Right.
It simply means that Norwegians generally enjoy a higher degree of freedom and legal protection to express themselves than citizens in most other countries. These indexes are comparative measurements.
They map out a spectrum.
Yes, a sliding scale.
So it's not a binary yes or no condition. The source points out that some countries are classified as free, others as partly free, and others as not free.
Exactly.
So North Korea and China fall into the not free category. But then you have a country like India, which is the world's largest democracy, categorized as partly free.
Right. And whether you agree with the exact placement of every single country is kind of beside the point.
It's the broader reality that matters.
Exactly. The broader reality is that freedom is measured on this comparative spectrum, which naturally forces us to look at how the world's most powerful nations stack up against one another on that highway you mentioned.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room.
China.
Yeah, China's central role in this global debate. You really can't talk about global freedom of expression without talking about China.
You really can't.
It takes up a massive amount of the geopolitical oxygen.
It does, and the essay spends time breaking down exactly how and why that happens, because China isn't just randomly singled out.
Right. They are a massive global player.
Exactly. It is one of the world's leading economic, technological, and military powers. When you possess that kind of immense power and influence on the global stage, Western governments, media organizations, international commentators, they are naturally going to scrutinize your internal systems.
Of course. But defenders of China's system bring up a very real critique here, which I think we need to address.
Oh, absolutely.
They argue that a lot of this Western attention isn't driven by some pure-hearted altruistic concern for human rights.
Right.
They argue it's selective, it's often exaggerated, and it's fundamentally driven by strategic geopolitical competition. Like, they view the West's focus on human rights as just a weapon designed to contain a rising rival.
And the essay acknowledges there is absolute truth to that observation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. If we connect this to the broader historical picture, great powers have consistently appealed to high-minded moral principles while quietly pursuing their own strategic interests.
Right, it's classic statecraft.
Exactly. A country might suddenly care deeply about human rights abuses in a rival nation, while conveniently ignoring identical abuses in an allied nation.
An allied nation that, say, supplies them with oil.
Or strategic military bases.
Yes.
Human rights, democracy, security. These concepts are frequently used as a moral cloak to justify raw foreign policy.
So true.
The author emphasizes that we have to recognize those incentives. We have to separate universal principles from the geopolitical motives that hitch a ride on them.
Okay, let me push back on that on behalf of our listeners, because this is where the debate usually gets incredibly muddy.
Go for it.
If Western criticism of China is heavily influenced by geopolitical rivalry, like if a country only cares about human rights when it benefits them economically or militarily, does that fundamentally invalidate the human rights criticisms being made? I mean, doesn't that hypocrisy make the whole critique completely hollow?
It makes the messenger hypocritical, certainly, but it does not make the critique itself hollow. The essay is very explicit about this distinction. Identifying political motives behind a criticism does not automatically invalidate the factual reality of the criticism.
Right, two different things.
Exactly. A government's strategic interests and the factual accuracy of the allegations they are making against another government are two entirely separate variables. They have to be evaluated independently.
So even if the motive is bad, the facts could be right.
You can criticize a nation for entirely selfish strategic reasons, and your criticism can still be 100% factually correct on the ground.
Which brings us to the economic argument, because when the factual reality of state control is brought up, the immediate counterargument is almost always China's undeniable economic success.
Oh yeah, it's the ultimate defense mechanism.
Right.
And the author notes that China's modern achievements are staggering. I mean, we are looking at unprecedented strides in economic development, the most massive poverty reduction campaign in human history.
Sweeping infrastructure projects, absolute manufacturing dominance.
Exactly. But the essay draws a hard line here. Economic success and freedom of expression measure completely different aspects of a human society.
They're entirely different metrics.
Yes.
Lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty is an incredible achievement. It grants a government immense legitimacy.
Yeah.
But excellence in infrastructure does not automatically imply excellence in free speech.
It doesn't. So once we strip away the geopolitical motives and we separate economic success from freedom of expression, we are left with the core issue.
The reality on the ground.
Right. We have to look closely at what it actually means to live under these different systems of speech regulation. This raises what the author positions as the central defining question of this entire debate.
Now, what's that?
Does a citizen possess meaningful space to criticize their government without risking their freedom or safety?
Wow. Okay, so that's the ultimate litmus test. Does the citizen have meaningful space to criticize without risking their safety?
Yes. And the essay explains that in some countries, the answer to that question is yes, albeit imperfectly. But in other countries, the answer is an unequivocal no. And the reason it's no is the crucial part. It's because the state has criminalized the very act of asking the question.
Wow.
Now, earlier we talked about freedom existing on a sliding scale, right? A spectrum.
Yeah.
But the author makes a profound philosophical distinction here. When you compare a society that sometimes restricts speech with a society that criminalizes the act of questioning power, you are no longer looking at a difference in degree along a spectrum.
You're looking at something else entirely.
You are looking at a difference in kind.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about it like a sport. It's the difference between a soccer game with a terrible biased referee and a scenario where the stadium is locked and the sport itself is outlawed.
I like that.
In the first scenario, you have a deeply flawed game. The referee might be making terrible calls, the rules might be applied unfairly, but you are still on the field. You can still yell at the ref.
Right, you're playing.
But in the second scenario, you aren't allowed to play at all. The very act of questioning the structure is a forbidden offense.
That is a perfect encapsulation of what the author calls equivocation.
Equivocation.
Yeah. When critics try to equate those two scenarios, when they claim a bad referee is exactly the same as a total ban on the sport, they aren't being nuanced. They are being intellectually dishonest.
Right, because the stakes are totally different.
Exactly. And the essay dives deep into the mechanics of what happens to a society in that second scenario. When a state exercises extensive fundamental control over what people can read, discuss, or criticize, it doesn't just silence dissent in the moment.
It does more than that.
It creates a pervasive, long-term chilling effect.
So how does that chilling effect actually work on a psychological level for the average citizen, like day to day?
It operates through ambiguity and fear.
Ambiguity.
Yeah. When the laws governing speech are intentionally vague, like when you can be detained for something as broad as provoking trouble, citizens have no idea where the invisible line is.
Oh, so because they don't know where the line is, they just stay super far away from it.
Exactly. To ensure their safety and the safety of their families, they stay miles away from the line. They self-censor.
Wow.
Over time, this creates an environment where conformity is heavily rewarded and independent inquiry is viewed as a dangerous liability.
So it's not that people lose the physical or mental ability to think critically.
No, not at all.
It's that the risk-reward calculation changes so drastically that intellectual curiosity is basically replaced by political caution.
Yes. People simply stop testing prevailing assumptions because the life-altering consequences just aren't worth it.
Right. Why risk everything?
Precisely. And the author emphasizes that this isn't just a criticism unique to China. It applies universally to any society.
Right. It's a human trait.
The more authority determines the boundaries of acceptable opinion, the narrower the space becomes for experimentation, competing ideas, and ultimate human advancement.
Because humanity's greatest leaps forward almost always come from people willing to question accepted wisdom, not just preserve it.
Absolutely.
But, here's the inevitable roadblock in this conversation. The moment you point out this stark difference in kind, or highlight the psychological toll of the chilling effect, defensive walls immediately go up.
Oh, instantly.
People deploy the ultimate conversational countermeasure. They point out the glaring flaws of the critic's own system.
The classic whataboutism trap.
Yes.
And the author tackles it head-on. Defenders of China's political system, or really any authoritarian system, will predictably respond to critiques by shining a massive spotlight on Western failures.
Like what?
They'll point to opaque algorithms, censoring content on social media, intense political polarization, tearing countries apart, severe corporate media bias.
Cancel culture destroying lives over a single tweet.
Exactly. And aggressive surveillance measures the West imposes in the name of its own national security.
And look, to be fair, the essay doesn't try to sweep those Western flaws under the rug, does it?
Not at all. The source explicitly validates those criticisms. No society on Earth possesses a spotless record on free expression.
Right. Western democratic systems are incredibly messy.
Deeply flawed. But the author breaks down the logical fallacy at the heart of this whataboutism.
Okay, what is it?
Exposing flaws in Western democracies does not automatically prove the existence of greater freedom elsewhere.
Ah. Because demonstrating hypocrisy in one system doesn't somehow magically validate the restrictions of another system.
Exactly. They are completely independent variables. The existence of extreme cancel culture or media bias in a democracy doesn't erase the reality of state-sanctioned censorship in an authoritarian regime.
Right.
And conversely, authoritarian restrictions don't somehow excuse the shortcomings in democracies.
But I have to play devil's advocate here because a lot of people feel very strongly about this.
Sure.
If a democracy is actively struggling with massive, systemic internal issues where corporate interests heavily manipulate public narratives, or where citizens are terrified of social ostracization for expressing a dissenting view, do they even have the moral standing to criticize another nation's policies?
That is the question, isn't it?
Like, doesn't a country need to clean its own house before it starts pointing fingers globally?
It's a totally valid frustration. But the essay answers it by shifting the focus entirely away from the messengers and onto the standard itself.
Oh, interesting.
The author notes that this debate isn't actually a cage match between China and the West. It is a universal question that every single human civilization must confront. How much freedom should individuals have to question those who govern them?
Right. Every civilization has to figure that out.
Every government, whether democratic or authoritarian, has structural incentives to shape information, control narratives, and protect its own legitimacy.
Of course.
But the defining difference is how much institutional room citizens retain to participate in open debate and push back against that control.
So it's not about which specific country is wagging the finger, it's about establishing a universal baseline.
Exactly. The author argues that if freedom of expression is a principle worth defending at all, it must be defended consistently across the board.
So the same foundational standards should apply whether the government in question is Chinese, American, Indian, Russian, or Norwegian.
Yes. The essay asserts that we can only have an honest conversation about freedom if we apply these principles universally rather than selectively. You don't have to be flawlessly perfect to advocate for a universal truth.
But, okay, if these principles of free speech are truly universal, and if they must be applied consistently across every civilization, it forces us to ask the ultimate uncomfortable question.
Which is?
Who is actually in charge of enforcing this? If a sovereign nation decides it's going to criminalize dissent and lock the stadium doors, who steps in to stop them?
The author asks this exact question from the perspective of a hardened skeptic. Who enforces these universal standards?
And the answer?
The answer the essay provides is honest and, well, it stings. No one.
Wait, no one at all?
No one. There is no global sheriff. There is no neutral international army that's going to sweep in and compel a superpower to allow free speech. There is no all-powerful global court that can force compliance. But, and this is really the philosophical climax of the essay, the absence of a global policeman does not make the right to free speech a fantasy.
Then how, if there's no external enforcement mechanism, how does the concept even survive?
Through self-enforcement.
Self-enforcement.
Yeah. The author explains that the true enforcement mechanism doesn't come from the UN or foreign sanctions. It comes from the innate biological human craving for freedom.
Oh, wow.
All human beings crave the ability to express their reality. And that craving is the only enforcement that has ever truly mattered in the long run.
That's powerful.
The essay vividly describes how this works in practice. Every whispered critique between friends, every smuggled pamphlet, every single citizen who dares to question power despite the risks is an act of self-enforcement.
So they're keeping the concept alive through sheer will.
Exactly. They don't need a foreign army to validate their desire for freedom. They only need the unshakable internal truth that their longing is legitimate. The geopolitical debate about China, the hand-wringing about Western hypocrisy, it is all ultimately just the latest chapter in this ancient, enduring human tension between authority and liberty, order and dissent.
So what does this all mean? We started by talking about those two binary camps, the people who think free speech is a utopian absolute, and the people who dismiss it entirely because the real world is messy and hypocritical.
Right.
The essay clearly shows us that the truth lives in the struggle between those two poles, and that it requires constant active defense. But when the author talks about whispered critiques and smuggled pamphlets as the ultimate self-enforcement of our human craving for freedom, it really makes you wonder about the future.
How so?
Well, what happens to that innate human desire when technology evolves to a point where a government can monitor not just public protests in a town square, but our private digital whispers?
Oh, worry.
What happens when authorities or corporations, for that matter, can track our search histories, analyze our algorithmic behavior, and mathematically predict our dissent before we even form the words to speak it?
That is a terrifying thought.
Will the human craving for freedom always find a way to adapt and outpace the modern tools of surveillance? Or are we entering an era where even the modern equivalent of a smuggled pamphlet becomes completely impossible? It's something to mull over. We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives, keep exploring the gray areas, and we'll catch you next time.